Okay, welcome everybody. This is Lacy Frazer with Whole Soul School and Foundation, and I am here today with Jeff Jones, who Jeff and I go way back in a lot of different ways, which we won't go into at this point, but Jeff is a dear, dear friend, and he is somebody who has gotten, I think, very in touch with his soul self, but also his egoic self, and the ego and the conditioned self has been a topic for Whole Soul this last month in January, and moving into February, we are going to talk more about the defensive structure of the ego and how it works really hard to protect us. And in some beneficial ways and in many not so beneficial ways. So I really invited Jeff in today to really conversate about ego in general, and whatever he wants to talk about with respect to his own ego and his own ego awareness, because he's been on quite a journey when it comes to learning about the self and becoming more aware. So welcome, Jeff.
I'm glad to be here.
So we're not going to tell your whole story today. That's going to be saved for another day and for the film we're going to be making, and also to tease the audience to make them want to come back. So, but we do want to talk a little bit about ego, and I know you have a lot to say about that. You've seen the movie The Shift on many occasions, and you have worked very hard over the last several years to become aware of ego and to shift into a more soulful place and a place living a more authentic life. So other than this introduction, I have no agenda for the conversation. I'd just love to hear your own thoughts and wisdom about what ego means to you.
For me, on the ego standpoint, it would be to start out to break the word down and to understand exactly what that word means to me. And it would be to the three letters in ego, E-G-O. And for me, that stands for edge, God, out moment. And when you push that spiritual part of yourself away further enough and you listen to something that is not real, which would stand for your fight or flight in your ego, you would take and think that was the right way to be, and understand it. For me, an example would be as I was introduced to my awakened self, and understanding me, to go back and reflect to it would be to, for example, I said I'm a hillbilly from the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. I'm dyslexic. I can't hardly read. I don't understand well. And I had a group of people look at me and said, "We're here." And I was challenged. And in that challenge, and seeing that challenge physically in front of me, my ego was challenged, and that was the part of the fight or flight. I had a choice right then.
So you're referring to when you introduce yourself like that, you're referring to the man you sort of used to be in your ego identity before you really shifted. So when you use words like hillbilly and dyslexic and illiterate, these are words. This is how you defined yourself.
Yes, it was. Exactly.
And it wasn't until you went through a pretty profound program with another group of men who all stood up and didn't let you get away with defining yourself in those terms.
True.
And so that's the fork in the road that you faced, it sounds like.
Yes, and to have, I think we've all agreed to, at certain moments in our life, to have conversations. We cross our paths, and we have an opportunity to either open ourselves up to the people we know, or we can choose the other path and walk away. And I think for me, I was, challenged by a person telling me that I don't think you're quite ready yet. So that really started the path being open.
Quite ready for what?
Didn't know really what it was for.
But you just knew you just knew you were told you weren't ready.
Yes, and knowing that I could be better in my heart, and I have to go to my heart because most of the time we got 18 inches between our brain and our heart, and within that 18 inches, there's a lot of conversations can go on within yourself. To understand yourself and see and understand your own ego is phenomenal in itself. Because without understanding how your brain is telling you one direction and your heart is pulling you a different direction, sometimes you got to go into your intuition, into your gut, because that will lead you down the path that you need to be. Ever so that it may be challenging in so many different ways. One is the ego is most of the time untruths, no matter how you look at it. And you take that ego and you run with it until you come to a fork in the road. Or you feel like what for me was my ego was pulling me away from even loving myself.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I knew you before you made the shift in your own life, and that man who showed up was pretty angry. I would say anger and bitterness were two emotions that had a grip on you. And that was what your ego used to keep you in a place of fear and a place of unawareness.
The woe me.
The woe is me. The victim.
Yes. 100% of the time. It took me a very long time to realize I had I call it a catastrophic failure of my system. I didn't love myself enough to be able to tell anyone that I loved them in that moment. I had to practice and know that when I go to a mirror in the morning and look at myself in the eyes and tell myself I love me before I could tell anyone else I love them. And that we come from a heart-centered place, no doubt.
So before that shift, though, you can say not only did you not love yourself, but how would you say you felt about yourself?
I was nothing. I couldn't, there wasn't no feelings there to have.
So you were, so feelings other than the anger and the bitterness about
Yes.
life and life circumstances.
Why me? Why me? I will tell a story. I will start to tell a story today. And if it happens another way, I had a stepson, and to be honest with you, I was running drugs, and that's the truth. And I got caught for and I went to prison, but it being in prison, it helped me. But the day I drove by my son, and I seen him, and then I have to go pick him up from under a car, and he lays in a coma for a long time. I understand now that time and point in life was written already. To me, it was written already, and it was for him to show me love, and I wouldn't accept it. It was for me to tell him I was proud of him and never would. That was being driven by ego. To be able to drive by him and then go to the accident scene a horrific one, really. He was laying underneath the car, and had to pull him out, put him on a life flight, and really, that was my catastrophic failure in that moment. Not only, I wasn't providing for myself, I couldn't provide for him no more, and that was the end. That was, and I held on to that anger until someone that had enough knowledge to challenge that and start cracking the armor off, if that's what you want to say. And I see that in myself. To be able to live life whole now, but still yet be able to realize, you deal with your ego every day. Every day, when you awaken, your ego is already telling you to try a different thing or do a different way. But now I choose not to. But it's still there every day. We live with our ego. It does not disappear. It has different faucets that it will come through in the water, and you won't even realize that's what it is until you got to prepare yourself. You got to ignite the spirit within yourself and know that's greater than what's the ego is telling you to do.
So it feels, if I sort of follow the thread of what you're saying, you had this catastrophic event in your life, and you had a number of negative experiences in your life that left you a pretty angry and bitter man, and you were not connected to source or a higher power. You were pretty disconnected from yourself and from others and from any kind of God. And probably the accident and the situation with your stepson furthered that chasm in your connection, or disconnection, I guess I should say. And then you end up in prison, and you realized at some point along the way you had some brothers in arms, so to speak, who helped get you into this program, and it was a program that confronted you about the way you were feeling and your victim stancing and your anger and your bitterness that kept you in. It was your armor. That was your armor. Your ego that was characterized as angerness and bitterness and a victim was your armor, and it kept you disconnected from everyone and everything and yourself. And as long as you were feeling sorry for yourself, you were stuck in that armor. But the day, and I was there to witness it, the day that you shared your story about your stepson, which you had not shared with many people, was the day you sort of broke wide open with respect to allowing vulnerability into your world.
The day that we talked, we bring my stepson up, and for him, was I had questions, and it was I didn't realize it was on the spiritual sense of things, because at the time I was totally dealing in my ego, pointing the finger, which I had 3 pointing back at myself. If you point one finger, you got 3 at yourself. Now I point with my hand, point it completely out, giving everything I got to whatever I say. But for me, I was laying in bed, and this, I realized that everything that had happened in this accident scene, and I said to myself, why is this being given to me? And I had to ask that, and I still, to be honest with you, I still in my ego, because really I took it in my ego and even turned it up a notch, even getting madder, I'm going to get the man. I'm going to get the man that done all this. I'm going to do, but then I start learning this trait that and I call it a trait. I focus on me, because I cannot help no one else until I help myself. Realizing that I go into this classroom with this band of brothers, and that's what I call them, and I start opening up. And I tell this story, and everybody looks at me. everybody in the room looks at me and like, whoa, where'd this come from? And that's the very first time I realized, being truthful with myself, that the spiritual self was starting to emit itself. And that spark, if you want to call it a spark or igniter, started burning. And I was allowed to speak freely in this group long enough to start praying about it, start meditating about it, and giving thought of why this came to me this way. And I myself, his spirit came to me and stayed with me to protect me, because he knowed that I was totally in my ego. But he also he stayed with me long enough to let me realize that life is something else different besides what I'm doing. And
But you had to really open to that concept, that idea. You had to open to that experience. And I think what's really important, especially for people who are just stepping onto this path for the first time, is to understand that the first step is this concept of self-awareness, and that, these men, you had to first be willing to tell the story and to explain to others about this very catastrophic, tragic, hurtful, sort of dark night of the soul experience that you had. And of course, there's many more details to the story that we won't go into today, but your first step was to share this very, very personal story with your band of brothers, and to allow the emotion to come up and just let it run, let that emotion run, and out with that emotion that was flowing out of you came the bitterness, came the anger, came all of that. And as that left you, something else expanded in you, and it was your heart. It feels like to me it was you opened to a different way of understanding yourself, understanding why you had the experiences you had.
Yes.
That Copper, your stepson, is a teacher, and it was really your experience with him, and then coming to prison, and all of that had purpose.
Yes, but it all became down to the work that I wanted to give myself, and before it was over with. Yes, he was there. I know he was connected to me, but until I figured out that what he was, he really, my son stood for love. He loved everybody. And it come down to me not loving myself, and until I learned to love myself, practice it, believe it, know it, breathe it, drink it, eat it, and know that I cannot be physically in this world without loving myself, and know to this day that until I figured that one space out in the micro, that he stayed attached to me. And he kept me alive long enough to allow me to do that. And that is deep. That is very deep for me today. That part of it was insurmountable to what he done for me. Knowing that he probably had a place he could be, a place he could go, in his freedom, he wouldn't allow me to go no further than where I was at. And then for me to learn the knowledge about myself and realize what a privilege it was to start reading who I was and understanding. Do I have ego today? Yes. We
all do.
I drove down the road today, and if you're driving down the road, who's going to cut me off or why am I going, everybody going around me? I know I'm driving the speed limit, but, and do I need to be in the flow of traffic, or am I okay over here, Let me get to the far right, and it still don't feel right, so let me just speed up. So that's your ego telling you, in that moment, we gotta go. We gotta go. And it took care of me to get here, But also, in that moment, I know I love myself enough to have confidence in the next breath I'm going to take, and be okay with that. It's a yin and a yang.
Mm-hmm.
It's a balance. Mm-hmm. It is a balance. And until you figure out how to do it for yourself, or have someone help you to do it, or a group to do it, you'll be challenged. You'll be challenged until you want that.
Absolutely. I think about the last two blog articles that I wrote, and also in some of the conversations Marie and I have had, that, we're so conditioned to be reactive and responsive to our external environment. And what I'm so touched by is how often you keep coming back to loving yourself, which is the answer. And in this blog article that we are about to release for the month of February, I talk a lot about that. I talk a lot about, yes, the ego has all kinds of protective mechanisms, and it wants to kind of keep you disconnected. But once you connect into love, once you connect to love thyself, then everything else flows from that. And also, as I hear you talk, I think there are probably going to be some people listening who really think we're talking another language, and they will.
I did myself. I said to myself, "Who are them people?" That's what I said. And look at them, but that was also, let's refer, that's your ego telling you that, because you yourself have got to put the work in. You yourself.
And when you say that, what do you mean by put the work in?
Quieten yourself, understand what you're feeling, and know that if you're being pulled a certain way, it's okay sometimes. By being pulled a different direction may be the best route to go. It may be longer. We don't know. But it may be the best route.
So you're talking about, I think, intuition. You're talking about, getting quiet and listening to yourself. Because
I did mine running. I was in prison, and I started running every day. I started running 9 miles a day. 9 miles a day, no matter what. Rain, snow, sleet, whatever it was, I went and run 9 miles a day. And to realize, in that moment, that became my time of meditation. That became my time of prayer. That gave me time to give thought to someone else besides me, outside of my body, knowing that that intuition kicks in if you give that. There's been times that you can get so connected with a person that they don't even got to speak to you. You just already know they're calling you out and need to speak to you. And understand that that's okay too, because we have all got that connectedness. Mm-hmm. The threads of life. We're all threaded together.
Well, and that's part of kind of what came out of your shift from, whether we say ego to soul or head to heart. But I had an image as you were talking about running around the track, and that was your form of meditation that helped you really connect with yourself. I mean, your soul. Prior, your life was all about everybody else doing you wrong.
It was a big old soup bowl of junk.
Yeah.
It was a soup bowl of junk.
Yeah.
And everything I done, really, the end result was junk. And for me now, I would rather be happy. And to be happy, I still practice it today. When I wake, I thank myself for my first breath of the day. When I wake from sleep, and I go practice and I look in the mirror every morning when I get up and go to the bathroom or whatever, honestly. And I tell myself I love myself. Because I cannot go tell my granddaughter or my mother or my brothers that I love them. And that's all my brothers.
Yeah.
There's no way. Because if you're in your ego, you're going to say, we'll just get that by. Let's get that by. It'll be okay. But when you challenge yourself to understand your true self of who you are, then that armor, if that's what we want to say, or whatever we want to say, starts breaking away.
Yeah.
And you realize.
Well, one of the things that I feel you're talking a lot about is rather than breaking down what your ego looked like, you're talking a lot about what helped you connect to your authentic self.
Yes.
And that running was a form of meditation and a way for you to really connect with you and connect with others kind of in an etheric way, in an energetic way. Running is so meditative, can be. You've also talked in the past about doing sweat, Native American sweat.
Awesome.
And Native American sweat has brought you closer to yourself, connected more to source, right?
To understand the Native American sweat for me was my ego was judging it. And seriously, I was judging it in a way that I didn't think it was right to start with. And then I had a brother come to me and invite me into this place, and I said, I said, okay, I'll go try this. Really, didn't think it's for me, probably. Hadn't never been in no certain place for a very long time. If you want to refer to time, I don't care to. But he invites me in, and I realize that I've done this many times. Because to go into a place of worship, and that's really what it becomes to in a sweat. You go into a sweat lodge to pray. You're in the darkness, and you're praying to the Mother Earth, to each direction, and the Creator above you. In all creation is treated the same. Lizards, snakes, bugs, cats and dogs. We're all here breathing. What they choose to be as in front of us is what they choose. In the sweat is so dark you don't see the next person. All you see is what that person is speaking through their voice at that time. It goes to each person in prayer. So for example, I'll give you an example, and I love this example. I'll never forget it until I leave this form body. And I truly believe it, was my mother was up on this mountain in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and she was picking up firewood and doing the best she could. My dad was blind. And I go in the sweat lodge, and I pray, and this is probably 2 years prior to me getting out. That's 2 winters, and I give my whole heart to it. And all the thing I prayed for was wood to be provided for. That's what we burn is wood. We do it to this day. We gather wood to burn to keep our house warm and keep ourselves warm. And I know she was struggling, and she didn't really tell me that, but I prayed for her to have wood, and I know as far back as 2 years that for some unforeseen reason that wood started showing up for her for 2 winters. Some of the people she knew, some of the people she didn't know, and I know in that moment the power of prayer and allowing that oneness to be able to go back into a sweat lodge and understand that when my prayer come out and the brothers that was in the sweat was giving that one thought to my voice, and it was going into this entanglement of creation was phenomenal to me. It was unbelievable, and to recognize. And until I come home, the wood was provided. Never, never again did she have to worry about another stick of wood.
And that began through your prayer in the sweat lodge.
Yes.
And you tuning into the oneness of it all.
And knowing that, my ego said not to go over there,
To the sweat lodge.
Yes. My ego said...
Because you judged it.
Yeah, I judged it. My ego allowed me to judge it. But then I fell in love with it. And I knowed I was home.
Jeff, we talk about the many defenses that the ego employs, and of course one of the biggest ones is judgment. When you were thinking about coming into this sort of self-help, spiritual awakening type program when you were in prison, you had to be dragged there. You judged that from afar. It was not something that you felt comfortable in because of how you viewed yourself at the time, right?
Would not caught me in front of no group. I'll tell y'all people that right now. Would not be in front of no group, much less be sitting here talking on a microphone.
But let's just say that over the years you did that program, you came out the other side probably having read. The illiterate man who walked in that group, you came out the other side having read nearly every book in the library. You came out the other side with a band of brothers who are your true family, your true soul family.
Yes.
You came out the other side having a connection to your heart and to nature and to the oneness of the universe that you never ever could have imagined. And probably most importantly, you healed the pain and the suffering that you carried inside of you with respect to your stepson and his passing and all that went into that. And I just think your story and your courage to go through not just the program, but the work to, number one, identify your ego. You had to have, when we talk about our ego, it's not just us trying to figure out what our ego is. We learn about our ego from feedback from other people because we can't really see ourselves.
Sometimes that's the hardest.
That is the hardest, is we get feedback from our environment, especially people in our life. And if we don't know to see it as helpful, if we're not on a path seeking self-awareness, we're going to get what when somebody gives us feedback? Defensive. Right?
We're going to be in it.
We're going to
be in it to win it.
Right.
No matter how you look at it, your ego's going to let you know, hey, we can take care of this.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But when the worrying's, when that worry comes to an exclamation point at the very end of it, you go, uh-oh, I'm in trouble here.
Exactly.
I need help. To realize you got to ask yourself for help to calm yourself down. And it always comes back. Love yourself, because you cannot love your neighbor without loving yourself.
And so many people don't understand what that means. I mean, we say it, we talk about it. There's a lot of books about it, radical self-love, radical self-acceptance. But you're somebody who has really done the work to deeply know what that means, and not only what it means, but how it has changed you. I feel, when you feel the juxtaposition of the busy entrepreneur or the person who lives in the city who's racing around from point A to point B and always responding to their external environment and hailing a cab and making money and, living a very fast-paced life. And then I think about you tending to your garden and this is just a metaphor, but tending to your garden on the mountain, sweating in the sweat lodge, running the track or running period and meditating and connecting with yourself and with spirit, with source, whatever you want to call it. I mean, feel that energetic difference between the person who's so distracted by everything outside of them and you, who's sitting there, one with nature, being in the present moment as much as he can. And you, both of those people that I just described exist in all of us. Both exist in all of us. And so it's really, which one are we going to grow? Which one are we going to expand? Right?
That is awesome. Good words. Who am I going to expand? Well, I'm a whole lot happier on the spiritual side of things.
Yeah.
Most definitely. I realized that I have knowledge in me. The group looked at me, and another time that they looked at me and wanted a definition, and it's my words. I said, I'm wide open. I said, and they said, I don't understand. And I said, well, and really, in that moment when somebody said they don't understand, that's really my ego really probably bouncing it back to me so I could refer to a definition. And my definition of being wide open is allowing myself the flow of pure life, love, and be able to walk that next step each and every day. Have I experienced bliss? Most definitely. Would I love to stay in bliss and be here and floating off this chair that I'm sitting in? Most definitely. It's there. It is there. But the challenge is every day that you got to understand where your ego's coming from and work from that. And know that within your heart is the place of center. And that spirit will light you up.
Yeah, wow. Beautiful. That spirit will light you up. And actually, you are spirit, right? And the light is within you. And you just have to choose to fan the flame, so to speak.
Yes.
And it takes conscious effort to do that, because we're not conditioned to do that. We're not born and bred to do that,
No,
right?
it's not.
But I just want to end kind of with saying, you are such an inspiration to me, and I know many of the lives that you've touched, that you probably work with today, with the band of brothers you were with when you were in prison, and is that you have made a connection that many, many people yearn for and strive for. You've made a connection that no education is going to help make.
I agree.
As far as, a traditional education or a religious, organization. This is not about religion. This is not about education. This is really about the armor that you once wore having fallen off, and you connecting to yourself and your heart, and you living from the inside out, prioritizing self-care, self-compassion, prioritizing your connection to nature, prioritizing staying in the present moment as much as you can.
Yes, because you will have challenges, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
You will have challenges. Do I say a bleep word every now and then? Probably so. But I ask myself to move from that and go to a better place.
Yeah.
And that's just my ego showing up.
And just what you just said, that's awareness.
Yeah.
How many people walk through life saying bleep words all the time without any understanding that they carry energy, and that they are coming from an egoic place. And so you are in conscious awareness to know what you're thinking and feeling and acting, and then to reset yourself if it takes you down the wrong path.
That's right.
Because we're all going to do that. We're all going to take a step down a path that doesn't feel good, and we have to recognize
what that lesson is for that moment.
Yes.
And be in your moment. You got to ask what that lesson is in your moment and be in your moment.
Yes. Beautiful. Well, Jeff, I know you and I have many, many more conversations to have. We've already had thousands of them, and today is just another one. But I just want to thank you so much for being here and for sharing some of your thoughts around the issue of the ego. And, I really look forward to continuing the conversations in lots of different directions and lots of different ways, and most importantly, being together and sharing that energy. So, thank you, everybody, for listening. You can always tune in to us at Whole Soul School and Foundation on YouTube. You can like us. You can share links to that. And soon we're going to be up and running with a full website where all of these podcasts and blogs are accessible all in one place. So thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Spirit.
Awesome.
And we'll talk again.